Welcome to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. I'm your host, Fabian motherfucking Ojeda, and I don't know shit, but that's okay. All right, let's get this shit started. Thank you everybody for listening to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. Hope you all enjoyed episode number 44 with Jeff Doskin. Another podcast is always refreshing to talk to them and get their view on how they do things, different perspective. Definitely took a lot from, his social media tips. Might be implementing some of those. But we're back with a brand new guest today, and he's joining us all the way from the UK. I want to welcome to the podcast, Callum Schofield. How you doing today?
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you. All the better now. I'm you. It's great that we can connect across the pond.
Yeah, man. It's like, I'm old school, so I remember back in elementary school when, it was kind of crazy to have like a pen pal from, two cities away,
Yeah.
And here we are in 2021 on Zoom in real time on my funny little podcast here, right?
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? Like, what other world would we have met?
Right.
Like, you can't picture it.
Uh-huh. So you're actually, I think, our second international guest from the UK. I had a guest on before. He was really well-traveled guy, so he set the bar for you UK people. So I definitely want to hear some good stories from you, man.
Well, I will do my best. I'm probably not as well-traveled as him. And what I'm drinking right now for your listeners, it looks like apple juice, but it's not. It's something stronger. So I'm probably not going to hit that bar, but let's go with it.
That always helps, right?
Oh yeah, it always makes things easier, flows better.
All right. So first and foremost, I know the whole world, and I want to get your perspective on this because anytime I take I get an opportunity to talk to people from, I'm from California, and if people are from somewhere else, I kind of want to see how they're doing right now with their whole COVID thing. How are you guys doing over there in the UK? Is it still like things are locked down, or are things opening up a little more? How's everything going over there?
Well, we started rolling out the vaccine, but we're still on complete lockdowns. It's still not much. In 12 months, we've achieved precisely nothing, if not less than nothing, is basically the way I see it. Right. It's still very much lockdown. Nothing's going on here. And yeah, that's it, really. What's it like with you?
It's kind of how like you did it, things opened up for a little bit and then we went completely back down to everything's closed. Right now, with the recent election, they're trying to, get all I think the news said that, everybody should be vaccinated by the summer, which is, I guess, good news. But I mean, this is supposed to last 2 weeks. And then now we're how many months in, almost a year.
Yeah, so, exactly. It's mad. But I think we're the same. From like now till October, I think I'm meant to get mine in like September, October time. Mm-hmm. I can't see that happening because British are always late. Whatever they do, they are late. So it'll be like 2022 maybe, but I'm somewhere in the waiting list. I don't know where towards the bottom, but I'm somewhere.
Yeah, I just got my essential worker identification, so I should be good to get it soon, but I'll probably put it off a little, let the old people get it first.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I've said. There's no point me having it, as I'm quite, I'm young. I could say healthy. I'm on the outside, look healthy. So there's no point me getting it when people are in more need of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, before we jump into, a little bit about your story and what we're here to talk about, again, just because I rarely get an opportunity to talk to people from, other countries, I really wanted to get your perspective, man. I know recently, the U.S. has been kind of a shit show politically and in the news and everything. How does that, in your guys' eyes over there, or at least you personally, how do you see that? Is it kind of like, whatever, it's just the crazy Americans, or is it more so like, what's going on over there?
Well, it's one of those things that obviously over here, we only get snippets. So I would arguably say that we get the worst bits of your news. And that's what sells. But I'm sat here, if anything, I'm jealous of it. Yeah. Because our politicians are so boring, our politics. There's no one storming, there's no raids, There's no one with horns on their head invading London. But then you've got all that action over there. But from the British perspective, I know we see the worst, but it does seem just obviously with the year we've had, expecting that something weird and wonderful is going to happen. Not as wonderful, but it is portrayed as being absolutely mental. And I can't really describe it. It's so different from the British politics, which it'll make the news if two politicians have a sort of whispered argument when they sat around in their meeting rooms. But then in America, it's a completely different world. And that's how it's portrayed really, as completely different. And I can't put my finger on it because it's that kind of weird, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I get you for sure. Maybe we need to elect a royal family over here or something, right?
Yeah, you could do, but then again, there's a lot of hatred from British people towards the royal family.
Yeah.
Like if you're in a room of people, say 5 people, and you mention the royal family, I bet you someone will say, "Oh, I hate that queen," as if they know them personally. It's that. So it's. But again, that's really boring. No one's raided the palace. No one's raided the castles when they don't get something they want. So, yeah, it's two different worlds in some ways. It really is.
Yeah. I was watching that. I'm like, damn, these people played too many video games. They think they're in Call of Duty or something, you know?
Yeah, it's like that. It's something you would expect to see in a film. As you probably know more than me, as we have our British news, but we obviously get a lot from America as well. So you probably know more, but we only see the extreme maybe. And yeah, it just seems something like, has this been taken from a parody film?
No, that's exactly what it felt like. Yeah, that's exactly what it felt like. You know, but yeah, I mean, I just wanted to quickly get your perspective on that because, you know, to me, I'm like, you know, I'm on the inside trying to look even more inside, you know, but I always wonder, like, how does it look from the outside looking in, you know? But yeah, it's a shit show, and I'm hoping it dries up a little bit and starts to, you know, get back to some sort of normalcy. But we'll see, you know, especially with people getting that cabin fever from staying indoors all day with COVID. But I you know, I really appreciate you having you on. You know, I wanted to definitely give you an opportunity to, you know, promote your own podcast. We'll talk a little bit about you know, getting into comedy.
Yeah.
But I wanted to start off, you know, with your personal story, right? And we'll set it up. I'll just ask, you know, obviously you're from the UK. Where are you from in the UK?
I'm from South Wales, which is South Wales is quite hard to explain, but it's a joke that in the UK, South Wales is in the past, really. Like, I'll make jokes saying we've only just got Wi-Fi or running water. You know, it's very much a rural place that when I look out my window, I can see sheep and cows and horses. So, yeah, I'm just a traditional Welsh person, really.
Now, did you grow up like very rural or like more kind of in the city?
No, I was very rural. Like, I grew up in a town, but again, it's not a city at all. Like, you know, it's that kind of place where everyone knows everyone. Like my mother was a teacher, my dad was a postman, but my nan was a nurse, and those 3 jobs means that everyone knows who I am. You know, I'm not Callum, I'm so-and-so's son, so-and-so's grandson. And that's just how it is in this town, that everyone sort of knows everyone, which is quite a nice environment to grow up with, really. But then again, it sort of limits you because this is normal and you don't see anything further. Like in my town, predominantly, you know, it's all white people, for example. I think there's one black person in my town, and that, you know, because I'm Welsh, the most foreign we get is English. So it's really, it's great to be a part of this community, but there's a whole wide world out there that you don't experience unless you actually get out there as well.
I see. Yeah. So, you know, part of your story, right, is, you know, overcoming something, right? And I know something that you wanted to talk about, and you know, be as comfortable as you can be and share as much as you want or as little as you want. But you had a speech impediment, right?
Yeah, I have a stutter that I still I still have today. Like I would have said before that I suffer with it. I'm going to say I suffered with a stutter for 18 years, but now I just have a stutter. I think it developed when I was 4 or 5, maybe. That's about the common time that stutters develop. Now they got older, it obviously got a lot worse the more I became aware that I was different to other people. That's when it became worse. You know, there was times that I couldn't say my name. I couldn't say Callum. Couldn't say Schofield. I couldn't get a sentence out without stuttering. And as a response, I just wouldn't speak. Like everyone would see me as a shy, quiet child. And then the same as I got older, when I started working at 16, 17, 18, I would always be seen as the shy, quiet worker because I could say a few words and I could just about hide my stutter if I tried hard enough. And that was by not speaking. And it's sort of like one of those two things. Like on the outside, it looks like it's just you mess up on a few words, you block a little bit, you say a couple of sounds. But there's so much more to it. Like it's a psychological battle. But you know, they got a lot of self-doubt to get low self-confidence, self-esteem. And you see yourself as completely different to everyone else. And when I was like age 10, 11 maybe, that was when I started secondary school. So I think I was about about 4th grade. And that was when other people started to notice that I spoke a bit differently. So I became a lot more self-aware of how I sounded. And then that's where sort of the mental struggles of anxieties and fear really kicked in. Like fast forward to today, I'm not glad I went through it, but it's definitely made me the person I am today. So that's basically a brief, very, very brief summary of how I got from a 5-year-old with a quite a severe stutter to speaking to you today, really.
Right. Now, you know, you mentioned that, you know, it made you very kind of like quiet and shy. Did you ever get into like any like fights or anything where people were picking on you, or did you just kind of know not to? I think, you know, had you grown up maybe an American child, you know, in a public school or something like that, you probably would have got a few jerks picking on you, right?
Yeah, it was the same over here. Because I was such a scared, shy person, I never fought back. You know, part of me is glad I didn't, but then again, if it was my kid, for example, hypothetically, I would say, no, fight back. So I had a lot of like people would say I sound like a machine gun. I sound like a helicopter. Someone once said, when they're walking across snow, the crunch of the snow reminds them of my voice. I still can't comprehend that. I can see you trying to work out how that makes sense. I still can't, so I don't know if anyone else will. But I did get a lot, and there was times that when I was in school as well, that I would walk into the restrooms, the toilets, and there'd be a group of lads waiting for me, and they wouldn't let me leave the toilet until I said a list of words. That they would make me say my name, they would make me say words that I would stutter on, and it would, you know, they would keep me there until they've had a good laugh at me. I sort of felt like a performing monkey, for example, but at the time, it was what it was, really. I didn't think more into it. Like at the start, I thought, why does this lad keep asking me my name? He's really forgetful, but every day he asked me what my name is, but it was because I couldn't say Callum. So again, like if that happened to me now, I would stand up for myself. I would say more, but at the time, as I was a shy person, I didn't want to cause any conflict. So I would just sort of accept that 9 times out of 10, if I went into the toilets, then I would have a group of lads who would keep me there until they've had a good laugh at what until they've had a good laugh at me, really. And that was quite a challenge growing up. It really was.
Yeah. And I can only, imagine that. Did at what point did you start to work on it to where it wasn't as much of a impediment? You know, like how did you overcome that?
Well, I was working in McDonald's. I was working in McDonald's when I was, for 2 years when I was about 18, 19.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was just turned 18 and I had a bit of conflict with a customer, which I reacted badly and told him to fuck off, basically, because he was making fun of my stutter. And I nearly got the sack because of it. But luckily, my manager understood, so she let me off. And that was sort of the turning point. I thought, I can't live like this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I went on a speech course, which is here in the UK called the Starfish Project, which is a 4-day course, 4 days of working on your speech, learning a Costal Breathing technique, which is like a certain type of breathing when you speak.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a turning point. I came off that course a completely different person with a voice. Like, yes, I still stutter today, but I don't care anymore. Like, we're sat here just talking normally. So if I block, it doesn't really matter. Like, if this was a job interview, I would be using this technique 24/7 to really get my speech across. But for the authenticity of just two mates having a chat, then I'm not going to use a harsh breathing technique. But it was literally 3 or 4 days it took for me to go from terrified of stuttering. I would never speak about my stutter, which is the ironic part. It was so obvious I had a stutter, but it was still the elephant in the room. If anyone would try and bring it up, I would shut them down, but I didn't want to talk about it. So I went on this course, learned this breathing technique, and it really opened up my eyes, opened up so many opportunities, and it gave me a voice. And I've continued to be a part of that course. I went in September 2019. I went back in January 2020 and actually taught the technique to new people.
Wow.
And that's how it works, that new people people who have been on a course come back to help others. But for someone who only attended 5 months ago to come back and teach a technique, that's practically unheard of. And it's because I wanted it enough. Like, I went on that course really wanting to find my voice. And a lot of people ask me, am I a different person now? And I'm not. I'm still the same Callum I was.
Right.
But I can actually be the same Callum. I don't have to hold back or reserve myself. And since then, I've worked with a charity called Stop Holding Back and become a part of this charity. And it is what it says on the tin. It teaches you not to hold back and how to really run with your speech and really find the opportunities and be your true, authentic self, really. So it's been a whirlwind of a year and a half, maybe, but yeah, I wouldn't change a thing.
Now, and then just, hearing you speak there, like, you can hear the stutter, but it's not like it's throwing off the conversation, like, it's not like I can't understand you. You mentioned the breathing technique, Luke. Briefly, describe that technique. What is it? How does that work?
Yeah, well, it's called Costal Breathing, which is basically before a word, you take in a sharp breath and then hit the word on top of the breath. So, for example, I would go Callum and then blow out, release the air, then continue by just breathing in, then hitting the word on top of the breath, saying a few words. So I would say Callum Schofield and I'm from the UK, for example. And the more you practice, obviously, the less obvious the breath becomes. And that's why I've got to this point, because from, say, September to December, I worked non-stop on overemphasizing this technique. So it became almost second nature that, like we said, I have my own podcast, and when I'm editing it, I will see the little sound bar increase when I'm taking that breath in subconsciously without thinking about it, and it's not noticeable. I'm not aiming to be fluent, as no one's truly fluent. Everyone uses filler words or stumbles on words. I'm just aiming for effortless speech and to say what I want to say, when and how I want to say it, really.
Yeah, that, it's kind of it's interesting that with that breathing technique, I think that would be more of a, like, if you did that over and over and over again, I think that would be a little more difficult to understand the conversation than the authentic conversation that we were having before.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I put the effort in for the first few months, so I could get to this point where I'm confident and I'm happy speaking to you. As I could have sat you and not stuttered at all and used this technique, but I wouldn't have given you that quality interview. And as a podcaster myself, I know that's what we look for. Whether I stumble on the odd word, that doesn't really matter. It's more about the conversation, and that's what I do every day, really.
Yeah, and you mentioned your own podcast. I definitely want to throw it out there and promote it. What's it called?
Well, I'm actually in a changeover point, as I started off a podcast called The Schofield Stories, which was a normal interview style podcast where I get on people, some with stutters, some without, some more famous-ish people as well, just to share their stories of overcoming adversity or hardship. So it was very much personal development podcasting. And I did that for a year. And I thought, what can I do a bit differently? How can I have a bit of a niche? So it was actually, I put it out on my Instagram a few days ago that I put the Schofield Stories to bed. I've really enjoyed, I've done 50 odd episodes, 48 guests, listeners in 60 plus countries. But now my new podcast I'm working on, that should be out in about a week or two, is called The Perfect Road Trip Podcast. And it's basically guests come on and they design their perfect road trip, all hypothetically. So they decide where they go or what road they drive on. They decide who comes with them, what snacks they have on the journey, what they drive, what music they listen to. And it's very much just a light-hearted entertainment interview as opposed to the sort of personal development stories of hardship. And I've recorded a couple of episodes and I'm really enjoying it just because it's an excuse to have fun. Like, I recorded an episode yesterday with a friend of mine who was talking about how we're going to drive the Pan American Highway in a converted van with a YouTuber and an actress and his secondary school Spanish teacher because they speak Spanish. And it's just, it's more for me along the lines of comedy as well, because it's just that light-hearted, hypothetical road trip. As I say, the only catch is they get to design their dream road trip, but I'm tagging along too to judge and scrutinize every choice they make just for the purpose of the podcast. And it's just, it's something that I've not heard of before, as I've heard of virtual restaurants and other virtual discussion shows, but I did some research and I haven't yet come across a virtual hypothetical dream road trip podcast.
I've not heard that concept before. No, my concept is I don't have a concept. Ignorance is strength is famous line from 1984 by George Orwell. But I use it because one, the theme song for the podcast, I wrote that in 2004, and that's the name of the song as well.
Oh, right? Wow. Yeah.
And also because, I like to learn about stuff that I don't know about, so like I had a couple episodes ago, I had someone come on and talk to me about how she's an OnlyFans model. I'm like, I don't know anything about that. Right.
Yeah.
I'm able to kind of pick their brain. So that's kind of my concept, but I really like the idea that you're going with there with the perfect road trip. Now, not to spoil anything, but do you have like a quick, this is my perfect road trip without getting too deep into it?
It's a tricky one, as that's what I hate on my podcast when guests turn the questions on me, because it puts me on the spot and expect me to give this perfect answer. But I don't have one, because there's so many places I want to travel to, and I like my car, I like my driving, so it's hard to pick a specific car. Like, for example, I would love to drive around the south of France or southern Italy, like southern Italy, in an Italian 2-seater roadster with like maybe an actress who's my celebrity crush, just me and her, Ferrari, southern Italy. But then I think, but I'd love to go to Sri Lanka and India and Vietnam. So on the spot now, I would say it'd be me and this actress, a British actor called Amy Lee Hickman, who's my celebrity crush. And it'd be me and her in a lovely 2-seater Italian roadster driving around the beautiful sights of southern Italy. That's what I would say mine is.
All right. I probably wouldn't even take much with me, man. Just thinking about it now, instead of bringing snacks and stuff, I would just like stop at every different drive-through or restaurant,
Yeah, that'll be good. Where would yours be?
You know, I once took a road trip through, from, one end of the U.S. to the other, and that
Oh
was
wow.
really cool. So from
Yeah,
Georgia all the way back to California,
yeah,
and I didn't get to stop as much as I would have liked to because it was a 3-day drive, but with all the accidents and natural disasters at the time, there was a lot of
yeah.
fires in California at that time.
Oh
I
yeah,
really didn't have any time to do much because I did have to get back to work. But I would actually like to go through every single state. You know, um,
yeah.
I mean, obviously, there's some that I can't reach by car. Well, one Hawaii,
Oh
but
yeah, Hawaii. You have to fly out
uh,
there, stuff. But yeah,
but
that'd be cool.
yeah, and just kind of like uh, trying all the different. I like subtle differences, right? So, like you mentioned,
Yeah.
for example, that you worked at a McDonald's in the UK. I'm like, how different must that be from the McDonald's that I see here in California? Because your guys' menu probably has like things that I've never heard of, right?
Well, from what I've experienced, like I remember I was in an airport in France 2 years ago, and
Mm,
their McDonald's was so much better than the one I worked at. That their menu had so many more leaps and bounds.
mm,
I think it's probably the same, if not worse, that the American McDonald's probably got so much more
mm.
than my McDonald's. Like we have the very b- basic food. It's nothing that special. Like we have a drinks machine. It has small, medium, large. There's a setting for extra large, but
Mm-hmm.
that's not on the menu. So I think it's very much a basic food. Like if you had the American McDonald's and took out all the fun parts, that's the British McDonald's.
Oh man, yeah, because like even here in the U.S., you go to somewhere in the South, and then they'll have like regional only kind of menu items, right? Like I think they have like biscuits and gravy in the South,
Oh
but if
wow,
you come
yeah.
to California, and you're from the South, you're like, where's the biscuits and gravy? It's not there,
Yeah,
you know?
it's mad. Like well, we actually had a. I don't know if you do it in America. But we had a promotion. We had our promotional burgers were called the Great Taste of America. So they would like be a Tennessee stack and a California stack. And I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember what goes in it. Most of them were similar, but like one different ingredient, so no one really knew. But at one of our promotions was actually having these burgers that were allegedly from different states of America.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, yeah, and I'll be curious to see those because they probably don't represent the state they're
Oh no,
from.
I bet they don't. I bet they don't at all.
Yeah,
Probably. Oh, it's yeah. It's just interesting. Though. I bet that you haven't got a great taste of the UK
no,
promotion.
no, and see, I would try that immediately. I
Yeah.
think for a very brief period, we had like the taste of the world kind of thing, and it was like a McFlurry from the Netherlands, and then a couple of other items. It was like I don't think it was like a poutine, but they had some sort of like fries with bacon in them, and it was almost like
Oh,
a poutine, yeah.
that's a really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they did have something like that for a very brief period of time, but nothing that was too different. It was still very McDonald's. It wasn't going to blow
Yeah.
your mind.
Yeah. But
you know.
well, when I was in France, it was what was different was they had their normal ordering counter. Then in this McDonald's, they had like a counter for stuff like the what's the word like I don't know what it was, but it had like stuff like macaroons, like macaroons and all like that
Oh
kind
wow.
of, as if you walked into like a sweet shop. It had
Uh
a
huh.
counter purely for macaroons and anything sweet, and it was like I've
Huh.
never seen that before. I don't know if that's similar with you, but I thought, is it a French thing? Is this every McDonald's other than Britain? But it had a separate counter for like the sweet stuff, like macaroons and the sweet. Like if you having a continental breakfast, for example. Like when you're at a hotel
Mhm.
breakfast, you got the cooked stuff, you got the
Right.
not cooked breakfast stuff. It was that kind of counter in a McDonald's. So it was all like the
Huh.
croissants, the macaroons, the all. And I've never seen anything like that. I don't know if you have.
No, and that probably is just a French thing. It's
Yeah,
like they just have like quick access. Here you go, take it. That's interesting. I've not seen that. That sounds more like a fancy kind of bakery more than anything almost.
Yeah, it was fancy. I walked in and thought, am I in a McDonald's? Like, I didn't order from there, but I went in for a burger. I went in for a burger and like a cola, the normal stuff. But I thought, if I actually came in here at a different time, I would head straight to that sweet macaroni counter. I can only say macaroons, but they had so many different coloured macaroons on that one counter. That's what sticks in my mind more. And I thought, I've never seen that before. Never mind in a McDonald's.
Yeah. Now, can you imagine like if you were to go to like, I don't know, India where they don't even serve beef, like what would be there, Yeah.
It's mad to think about. Really is.
Yeah. Now, really quickly, just to kind of round out the conversation about podcasts, right? You did mention you just closed out the Schofield stories. What are some really cool memories you have of that, or like maybe like the most interesting guest or most interesting conversation you had on there?
Oh, there's quite a few. Like I'd probably say one of the best interviews I did was with a man called Mark Ormrod. Now he was a former Royal Marine, and he was in, and there was he knelt on a explosive device in Afghanistan on Christmas Eve, and he lost both his legs and his arm, and he became the British Army's first ever triple amputee to survive. So he's he's met the Queen, he's had honours like that. So to have someone like Mark Ormrod, who is a triple amputee, former Royal Marine, he competed in the Invictus Games, which is like Olympic Games for soldiers and stuff like that. And to have the honour to interview someone like Mark Ormrod, who I follow on Instagram and Twitter, but never thought I'd speak to him. That was one of the best interviews I've done. I've interviewed quite a lot of athletes. Again, like there's a Paralympic cyclist who actually comes from the same town as me, and I sent him a tweet on Twitter on the off chance he might see it. And now he's become a good friend of mine. I've got his phone number. We did a 2-part podcast together. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm friends with Mark Colburn, the Paralympic gold medalist cyclist. I have his phone number. It's like, how was this happen? So that's what it's hard to sort of pinpoint certain. Like another one is a singer called Daniel Johnson, and he was on the British version of the X Factor. And when I was 8 or 9, I went to see the X Factor live on tour with my mother when it came to my city of Cardiff. So I saw this singer, Daniel Johnson, sing on stage. He was my mother's favourite act on the X Factor that year. And now I'm interviewing him, and he gave a shout out to my mother on the episode because he was her favourite. And it's very surreal, particularly coming from me, who was someone afraid to put my hand up in class. Right. And now I'm interviewing people who I've watched on TV, who it's mad. It is hard to sort of say a few. That's why, I have a range of, I do have a very, like yourself, like no two guests are really the same. I have singers, actors. I have a lot of comedians on. I've had some comedians on who I've looked up to. There's a comedian called Dane Baptiste. And I've watched him on TV. I look up to him. I've loved his performances. And again, I sent him a tweet on the off chance. He was, I'll happily come on your podcast. And interviewing Dave Baptiste is a moment I will remember for the rest of my life. And that was, again, the moment I thought, maybe I could step into comedy. But I've always loved comedy. Like, that's been my thing. Some people have music, some have sport, some have film. Right. Comedy has been my thing. I love watching stand-up comedy, writing jokes. It's my thing. And then when I interviewed Dane, and he was talking about his journey, and I was thinking, this amazing comic has agreed to speak to me and come on my podcast. So maybe I could, maybe I could go from just writing jokes in my room to actually saying, yes, I want to be a comedian. So there's so many different special episodes for very different reasons, but I'd say those 4 are the ones that stand out the most.
Nice, yeah. I mean, you touched on comedy there, and you mentioned that's something you're trying. Have you done like a stand-up comedy show yet, or you're in the process of getting started? I know, again, COVID is kind of, you know, it's holding everybody back, right? But how far along are you with that?
Well, I've done a few sort of little sets, you know, nothing more than 5 minutes, nothing more than 3 minutes even. Done a few little virtual open mics, spoke a little bit about it, but actually, in about 6 days from this recording date, which is the 13th, this Friday coming on the 19th of February, I have my first sort of headline act, as I've started a comedy club for people who stutter, as I know quite a lot of people who stutter will never step foot near a comedian in case they get picked on. So I've set up this comedy club, and I've managed to be persuaded into doing the headline act. So I'm doing a 20-minute set, which is 15 minutes more than I've ever done before, to arguably probably the biggest audience. So that's going to be my first proper gig, you could say. But, you know, I've done little bits. I've like sort of put my feet into comedy, but then I'm actually leaping into it this coming Friday. And it takes a while. Like, I've done a handful of gigs, so that's why I wouldn't call myself a comedian yet. You know, like one day I will, because it's what I want. I've sort of got that, not confidence, but when you want it enough, then you will make it work. And it's what I want. It is really what I want. So one day I will be able to call myself a comedian, but right now I'm calling myself a aspiring comedian, a half comedian maybe. I'm on the process to it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to my first proper long show on Friday. I'm really nervous about it, because I've practiced my set so many times that I don't think it's funny anymore. So I'm telling myself that it was funny the first time I read it. It's just because I've done it so many times. But yeah, COVID being a massive challenge. But if it wasn't COVID, I would be working in a comedy club now, where it's just like walking around collecting glasses or something like that. I would have my face in a few comedy clubs, where there's open mics or just collecting glasses. But because of COVID, it's really hard to find opportunities. And most of the opportunities are all from America. There's hardly any virtual gigs in Britain. Right. So unless I have to stay up till 6 o'clock, 7, oh, sorry, no, it's 6 o'clock or 7 or 8 o'clock in USA time, which is about 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning for me. So unless I stay up till then, I'm not going to have the opportunity to perform comedy. So, you know, I've signed up for a few things, still waiting to hear back. But basically, it's the time that the people in charge of Britain, the British government, are telling anyone who's in the arts to retrain and find a new job, is their promotional adverts, which has gone down very badly. Right. And I've taken that to, no, I'm going to retrain as a comedian at the time when the arts, particularly comedy, is not in a very good place. So it's a challenge, don't get me wrong, but it's about time I went for it, really. I've sort of, you know, I've got pages and pages of material and jokes that I've written as a defense mechanism. You know, like when I've had a bad day, when I've been stressed, I would write jokes to get over it and sort of cheer me up. Right. I've got all this material, and I love comedy, so I might as well take that shot. But if I don't, I'll always regret not taking it. If I do it and nothing comes from it, fair enough. But if I don't do it, then I will really live to regret that. I have to at least give it a shot. Yeah. You mentioned, you know, sometimes writing things out, and then it kind of loses its luster, right? Because, I mean, I've tried that before, where I try to write out the whole podcast, like literally almost script it, right? And I'm like, well, that's not funny anymore, you know, because it's not, you know, genuine. Like I'm kind of, it's almost too contrived, you know. But I think comedy, from what I understand, is more than just, you know, the jokes that you write, because it's the timing. It's the, you know, your body language. It's connecting with the crowd, right? There's only so much you can practice with that, right? Because you don't have an audience. How do you feel as far as that aspect of comedy? You know, you think you got it down okay? Is it tough to prepare for that? How does that feel? Well, it's tough because of COVID, because I've still never performed comedy in front of an actual real life audience.
Right.
So that's going to be completely different, because me standing up here in front of a virtual audience in my room is completely different. And it's one of the things that you can practice it, but you will only learn when you're actually out in front of people. As I've changed my routine a little bit, that I'll always start with a joke about my stutter. I'll say, no, it's not your internet connection, it's me. Because that gets the elephant in the room and it gets out there. But before I would maybe stutter just occasionally, because when talking about jokes, if I haven't made my stutter beforehand, not that it's noticeable sometimes, but it's noticeable for me. So if anything, just starting with a joke about my stutter, saying, don't worry, it's not your Zoom connection, don't worry, it's not your internet, is a way to address the elephant in the room, and it puts me at ease, because everyone knows that I have a stutter. It's nothing to worry about. Like, one of my jokes for my 20-minute set is, if no one's laughing at my jokes, I'll just stand really still and pretend I froze and hold this position for 20 minutes and then say thank you and then leave it there. And everyone would think, oh, their internet froze. But it's like you said, there's only so much preparation you can do, as every audience is different. And if I was going to perform for an audience of like my friends, people my age, that would be completely different to performing for people my parents and grandparents' age, because the jokes you select, the way you deliver them, like, it's all to do with timing, as you said. And that was a worry for me. But I think, what if I stutter on a punchline? What if I, don't get the time right because of my stutter? I was thinking, yes, I might stutter, but the more I practice, the less I stutter. Like, that's why in school I was really good at the standing on stage and doing plays and this and that, because I would learn my lines off by heart. And it's the same concept. Like, some of the comedy I do is completely off the cuff. Like, if the audience are enjoying it, I will take it. Like, for example, if I will say a few more risky jokes and the audience like it, I will take a riskier path. If I say a risky joke and the audience, only half of them laugh, I will stick to the more liberal family comedy path. So it's all, you got to judge the reaction. Like, there's a bit in my comedy when I talk about masculinity and how you get the, very alpha males and stuff like that, and make fun of masculinity. And a part of it is I get an audience member to answer a few questions. I will rate where they are from alpha male to Zulu male on the alpha male spectrum. So it all depends on their reaction. And it was stuff like that which worried me most, because I can easily learn some lines and recite them. It's actually when they will say things that I might not have thought of. But it's practice. It's like the same as it's a skill. And any skill, practice makes perfect. As in the past, I've always been sort of funny in the moment. Like, if someone says something, I'll be the first one to come back with a sarcastic comment or an insulting comment or a witty response. So it's sort of it's changing from being funny in the moment to being written funny.
Right.
Because obviously, there's so many different kinds of jokes and kinds of funny. It's trying to get that balance right. So I feel like I've gone off on a tangent completely. So I hope I have answered your question somewhere in there.
Makes plenty of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a lot more to think about than just telling a few jokes. Like, I will imagine, how would this comedian tell this joke I'm writing? And then I would say, like, this comedian who's not very popular, how would he tell this joke? And I'll watch good comedians, I'll watch bad comedians. What makes someone good? What makes someone bad? And it's just about relating to the audience. That's why for this 20-minute set, I start with my stutter, and then I make some jokes about family and talk about my family, because it's a chance for the audience to get to know me a bit better, because all my jokes are based on true events. I don't have the imagination to make anything up. I'm very much storytelling, observational comedy. I can't make something up. The funny stuff I talk about is genuinely those embarrassing moments you see in films that has happened to me. And that's why I try to make myself relatable to the audience, really.
Yeah, I think, and you talk about relatability. I had a friend of mine, this comedian. I had him on probably like 10 episodes ago. And you know, he's Hispanic, Latino, whatever you want to call it. And I asked, you know, you kind of consider yourself a Latino comedian? And he said he wanted to be more than that, you know. But I think a lot of the time when it comes to relatability, that's why I think, you know, somebody like George Lopez is funny, because he brings up a lot of the stuff that I can relate to, that I've experienced. Do you think it's that way with you know, with the UK, right? Where it's more you grew up with mostly, again, just like white people, right? In a small town. Do you think they kind of gravitate more towards people that are like them, or they're able to laugh at like a broad you know, array of different comedians?
Yeah, I think the comedians that do the best, particularly in the UK, are ones that everyone can relate to. You might not necessarily find them funny, but you can relate to them. Like, they might say a joke about something that you would say to the person you're sat next to, oh yeah, I understand. You might not laugh at the joke, but you relate to it. And that's why there's certain comedians who are still really good, but they're a bit more, you either love them or you hate them. But the comedians that everyone seems to love are the relatable ones. And it happens that quite a lot of them are white British males. But I was speaking to a comedian called Daliso Chaponda, who comes from Malawi. He's quite a big comedian. He's been on Britain's Got Talent. And he was saying, yes, there's more white British comedians, but it's because there are more white British comedians than any others. So that's why we see more of them. It's not the misconception that they're favouring them. Like, obviously, there's a long way to go in representation of women comedians, LGBT comedians, disabled comedians, from different races, like black comedians. But there's more white male comedians. But then again, some comedians, like you got Ramesh Ranganathan, Nish Kumar, both of them. You've got Desa Chaponda. They are all generally popular comedians by everyone. They're not white, but they're relatable. So I think, you know, yes, you can have a niche. Like, we got people like Jimmy Carr in the UK, or who's a good comedian. Like, he's one of my favourites, but some of his one-liners are a bit too risky for certain audiences. So he's a great comedian, but not everyone loves him. But the comedians everyone loves, whether they're black, they're white, they're straight, they're gay, whatever they are, if they're relatable, the British public will like them. That's why for the last few seasons of Britain's Got Talent, you know, when you think of Britain, some people still think of a white society, but black comedians, women comedians, and again with gay and disabled comedians, have all got to the Britain's Got Talent final. They've got to the final. They've been in the top three. As there was a few years ago in Britain's Got Talent, the winner was a comedian who hadn't got a voice. So he was lost voice guy. So it was all like, he would type out his jokes and a computerized voice would say it, like, you know, the Stephen Hawking kind of thing. And in second place was a comedian who had learning difficulties and was also gay, I think. So it's these two people who, on paper, you might not be able to relate to, because they're both technically disabled and gay, won the hearts of the British public. So that relatability is the most important part. That's why my comedy is very much storytelling or observational comedy, because I feel like it's something people can relate to. Like, yes, I'll throw in a few risky jokes, but everyone does. But I think that relatability, regardless who you are, where you come from, if you're just it's as we talked about earlier with this podcast, if you're your authentic self, then that's what people will like. If you're giving an authentic interview like this, people will listen to it rather than a staged interview. And it's the same with comedy. If you're doing an authentic set, an authentic concert, a gig, then that's what people will like.
That makes a lot of sense. I once tried to listen to someone who started a podcast, you know, and everything they put out there sounded like they were reading. I'm like, I don't want to hear that. Like, I want to be like a fly on the wall listening to a conversation, you know, almost like I'm eavesdropping, you know. That's the best kind of, in my opinion, the best kind of podcast where you just have, you know, people having a conversation. You're listening to the conversation. You're just like somebody sitting at the table, you know?
Yeah, that's what it should be. That's like my inspiration for starting my old podcast, Schofield Stories, was I was a guest on a podcast and it was very scripted. And I remember thinking that I enjoyed it. It's a good podcast, but I was thinking when I was a guest, if I was a host, I would have said, can you elaborate on that? I would have dived a bit deeper into what I just said. And I thought, if I'm thinking all this, why don't I just start my own? You know, and that was literally the little thing, oh, maybe I could do it, was because it was a very generic layout podcast. I thought, well, I would have done stuff differently. So why don't I do things differently myself? And then that's how it started. So I completely agree. It should be a conversation between two mates. That's literally what it should be.
Yeah, definitely.
Personally, yeah.
Now, to kind of round out the conversation about comedy, you know, I really don't know too many comedians from the UK. I think I'm the only one I really know is like, you know, Ricky Gervais, right?
Oh, yes, yes.
But who are like maybe, I don't know, 5 to 8 different, you know, comedians who everybody should take a look at, you know, that are popular in the US. UK.
Right. I'll go. First of all, is a lad called James Acaster. James Acaster, he's just so awkward and funny. You know, I'm reading his autobiography at the moment. It's hilarious. He's quite a young comedian again. He's not new, but he's quite young in it. So he got years ahead of him. He's brilliant. Someone called Rod Gilbert. He's a Welsh comedian. And he's his sort of thing is he gets quite angry about certain things. They get quite passionate. And it's hilarious. He'll get angry about the smallest of things, and that's what makes him brilliant. I've seen him live as well. There's people like Jason Manford, Michael McIntyre. So Jason Manford and Michael McIntyre are two of the best observational comedians that there are. So those two are really good. There's again Ramesh Ranganathan. He's a great comedian. He talked about himself as obviously he's a Muslim and he's got Sri Lankan heritage. He makes fun of that. He's quite funny. I'm not sure if you've heard of Jack Whitehall. I know he's actually moved to America to try and break into comedy over there. Jack White, again, he's a young comedian, but he's quite, you know, he went to a boarding school, he has a rich family, he's quite posh. But he's still relatable because he uses that to make fun of. I'm just trying to think. There's loads of good ones. There's loads of good comedians. But yeah, overall, I would say James Acaster, Rod Gilbert. My two favourites is John Bishop as well. John Bishop, Ramesh Ranganathan, Michael McIntyre, James Acaster. Oh, there's actually, to try and put some diversity in there, there's a woman called Sarah Milligan. Sarah Milligan is from Newcastle, or she's a Geordie. So I'm not sure if you'll be able to understand her, as some people in the UK struggle, but she's hilarious. So there's a few, but I would definitely recommend Rod Gilbert and James Acaster as they're my two favourites. But I've seen quite a few comedians live, and Rod Gilbert, he has me crying from laughter every time. So I'll end the comedy section by saying, please check out Rod Gilbert. Like all of his tours are available on like Amazon Prime and stuff like that. So he should be quite easy to find.
Perfect. And now, really, really quick, last question. And I ask this just because there's sometimes like comedians that people just don't get, right? Like back in the day, you know, like in the US, a lot of people like Dane Cook, and I'm like, I don't understand that. I'm like, I don't think he's funny at all. Is there anybody, and not to be like negative or anything like that, but just, you know, we like to keep it real on the podcast. Like, are there any comedians that you feel like you just don't get? Not necessarily that they're overrated, because that's kind of like, all right, you have your own taste, but that you personally just don't get.
It's quite hard. I try to watch every comedian. Like there's some that I'll think I won't watch you again. There's one Scottish comedian called Frankie Boyle. Frankie Boyle, he's very, very much you love him or hate him. Like all his jokes, people will find offensive. You know, he's very much I'm sure he's been chucked off social media a few times. He's that kind of person that he wasn't allowed to perform on the BBC. He got chucked off panel shows because of his jokes. And the odd joke I find funny, but I just don't get him as such because his comedy seems to just be insulting everyone else and making fun of everyone else. And it's sort of like, some comedians do that well, but I think with Frankie Boyle, like, don't get me wrong, he's still a good comedian, but he's not my cup of tea because I rather stuff I can relate to rather than him making fun of other celebrities and getting himself chucked off Twitter for it. Really. So I'm talking about Frankie Boyle. If I met him, I would still really like to speak to him, but he's a successful comedian. But he's not my cup of tea. Like, I can imagine, like, I know, like, the comedian Michael McIntyre I spoke about. I find him hilarious, but I know other people who think he's a bit too over the top, too hyperactive on stage. So it's all perspective. But yeah, Frankie Boyle is a comedian. I would say he's not my kind of thing at all. He still could be a great person. I've never met him, so I can't judge him personally. I would still love to meet him as a successful comedian, but no, he's not my thing at all, really.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, we just like to keep it real, see, who is your cup of tea and who's not. Now, is there anything else you wanted to throw out there? I know we talked about, your stutter. We talked about your podcast. We talked about comedy. Anything else you want to throw out there to the podcast world?
Oh, that's a good question. As a podcaster myself, it's weird being on this side of things.
Yeah.
But it's more of a question for you, really. Like, when you imagine the UK and Britain, I'm curious, like, what do you imagine? Like, in my head, anyone outside of the UK will immediately think of the Queen and nothing else. So, like, what's your sort of perspective of the UK?
Yeah, just kind of like you mentioned, Mary, like, like here you see a lot of like hostility right now. You see, this whole left versus right. Like, I voted for some asshole, you voted for some other asshole, so now we can't get along, But you mentioned, how if there's like a secret whisper argument, it's going to make news.
Yeah,
so I kind of imagine it like that, But also, if you've seen some of the old National Lampoon movies, like they have the National Lampoon's Vacation, where they go to Europe, right? Yeah. And when they're in, I'm not sure if they're in England, but there's a guy on a bicycle who gets hit by Chevy Chase's character in the car, right? Yeah. So he's on a bicycle, he's doing everything he needs to do, and Chevy Chase hits him with the car, right? And so the guy that gets hit, he's all beat up and bloodied and bruised, and he's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get in the way.
Yeah, that's British. Yeah.
So that's kind of how I see it. But I mean, I imagine too that there's got to be a lot of, how do I put it? There's got to be a lot of wheels turning, because y'all always crank out great music, TV. Even though I gotta say we took The Office and made it better.
Yeah. True, I can't argue with that. Yeah.
But y'all have like great TV and music and arts and everything going on over there. So something's always turning is the way I imagine. I would like to visit at some point. I think my aunt lives in London. I don't know how she got out there. A Mexican lady.
Yeah.
But I would like to visit at some point. But I've never been. But that's kind of like how I see it. Just all that silly stuff.
That's pretty much that's what it's like. Like, if you walk into someone on the street, you will both apologize to each other, and you will keep apologizing until one of you walks away because it's awkward. But I find it interesting because, of course, for me, it's just normal. As I've lived in a small town in South Wales, but I've also lived in cities. I spent a few months living in Leeds, so it's more of a city, more diverse, and it's just, it's really interesting. Like, it's just it's easy to make fun of. Britain is so easy to make fun of, like the politics here. That's one of the jokes I do, is particularly about the coronavirus. I describe Britain's sort of way of dealing with the coronavirus is the equivalent of a man getting a girl pregnant because of a hole in a condom, then washing out that condom and using it again.
Yeah.
That's the way I would describe British politics, is they do something wrong, then wash it out and do the same wrong thing again. And it's so it's just, it's easy to make fun of, is the best way to put it, really. And I shouldn't say that, but obviously I'm proud of where I come from. I'm proud to be Welsh, as I class myself as Welsh as opposed to British. But I think that's just a Welsh thing, really. Obviously we have like Wales, Scotland, Ireland, England, and there's that rivalry there.
And it is kind of like weird how y'all identify too, because, you know, if you ask me, you know, what's your nationality, I'm American, you know, and I don't say I'm, you know, Californian first because I live in California, but the way the UK is made up, I guess, I mean, do you, like you said, you say you're Welsh first, right? Before you say British, right? But would you be considered both?
Like, if you're filling out a form, unless the form is made in Wales, there won't be an option for Welsh. Basically, like, you know, but like the term British covers England, Scotland, Wales, and maybe Northern Ireland. I'm not too sure. But yeah, so you know, like the passport I've got is a British passport and all that, and because like Britain are leaving the EU, we're getting new only British passport as opposed to like European passports and all that. But I still count myself as Welsh. Like, and it's a tricky one to explain because there's nowhere quite like the UK. Like Wales and England are different countries, but they're still the UK and Britain. It's like saying France and Italy are different countries, but they're still the same. It's sort of, nowhere is quite like Britain in that sense. You know, nowhere is a country with some extra countries inside. So that's why it's always difficult to sort of explain, really. I think, you know, things are getting easier. There's more understanding. I know when I've visited a few places in America, and I thought no one will know where Wales is. But when you speak to people, people actually do know where Wales is, or that they know it's not. They just know a little bit more, maybe. But I don't blame people for not knowing, because you think of the UK, you think of Britain, you don't think of 4 more countries squashed into Britain. So it's quite a hard thing to get your head around, particularly when Scotland they wanted independence from Britain, and Wales. Some people in Wales want independence. It's like a very unhappy family, I could call it. You've got England, which may be like the parent, and then Scotland and Wales are the children trying to leave the family, but the parents keep pulling them back in. I think that's the best metaphor I can use. Is a very dysfunctional family for the UK.
Yeah, I remember I kind of tripped out a little bit because, you know, I always used to think that I guess I use like English, British, you know, England, Britain. I use those interchangeably, right? And I used to think like, wait a minute, you know, the Union Jack, I thought that was like the flag for England, right? But they have their own flag, right?
Yes. Yeah.
It's like
so
the red
weird.
cross.
Yeah. So England have white background, red cross. Scotland have a blue background, white cross, and those two combined make the Union Jack, which is the British flag. The Wales have, white on the top, green on the bottom, and a massive dragon in the middle for no apparent reason, which isn't incorporated on the flag at all. But yeah, so they're all completely different. But that's one of my pet hates, is when someone calls me English. Like, if someone calls me British, I'll be, okay, fair enough, I technically am, even though I call myself Welsh. But English, Welsh, Scottish are completely different. There's this sort of hatred towards the English, which people from Scotland and Wales will immediately have a connection because they both hate the English. Like, you know, not that obvious. Like, you know, my stepdad is English. So, you know, I live with an Englishman and I don't hate him at all. But it's very much, when you're Welsh or Scottish, that mutual hatred of the English in sporting events and in just general chat is what bonds you, really, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if it's anything like that in America, where like your different states, like you got the North and South, or
I think it kind of makes more sense, like comparing North to South or East Coast to West Coast, you know, kind of like a rivalry like that. But that does make a little more sense, because I think from what I gather, then England is kind of like you said, like the mom or whatever, but also maybe kind of like the favorite child, right?
Yeah, that's actually a great way to describe. I might use that in my comedy routine. England is the favourite child, because everyone talks about England and London and the English, and they forget about poor little old Wales and little old Scotland and Northern Ireland. But Northern Ireland is forgotten about by people in Britain, so they've got no chance. But that's literally what it's like. Like, England is the one that people know and are aware of, and then it's like, oh yeah, you got Wales and you got like. It was last year, I think, or maybe the year before, that when your former president Trump visited the UK, he talked about the Prince of Wales, but spelt it Wales as in the sea creature Wales, as opposed to the country Wales. And that was it. Well, that was all over the news over here. How he spelt Wales with a H, as if it's the Prince of the sea creature Wales, which is just comedy gold. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, that's the best you were going to get from him. I'm surprised he spelled that correctly.
I was like, we should be grateful he said Wales.
Right.
He could have just said the Prince of England, which would have upset the Prince of Wales, but still.
Yeah, or he could have said, the Prince of Dolphins.
Yeah, probably could have. He absolutely could. But that's it's still nice to know Wales is getting its name out there ever so slightly.
Yeah, I mean, well, you guys have some pretty cool bands out there, right? Isn't it? The band Bullet for My Valentine, aren't they Welsh? You ever heard of them?
So yeah.
Pretty cool, like little metal band. I love that band.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of that kind of music. I'm not sure if you hear it, but there's the Stereophonics. Stereophonics are Welsh. They're a band worth checking out. And Wales has got a lot more. It seems like, of course, I'm not sure if you heard of Sir Tom Jones. Tom Jones comes from a town about 15, 20 minutes down the road from me. And it's like, Tom Jones is one of the, he lived in Las Vegas for most of his life, and he's still got a very strong Welsh accent. So there's a lot more to Wales than meets the eye, maybe.
I perked right up when you said Tom Jones, man. It's funny. Like I know people don't expect me to. I love Tom Jones music,
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's not unusual. Yeah.
I think that voice, that's like one of the most distinctive voices in the world. And I've been to the town that he grew up in just for the sake of it. Like, it's literally 20 minutes. There's a couple of stops on the train from my town. And that's how small Wales is. It's like, oh yeah, Tom Jones, he used to live 20 minutes away from me.
I'm like, what's up with that tan though, man? That guy was super dark.
Oh yeah. I can't explain that one myself. But he lived in Wales and Las Vegas. Neither of them should have given him a tan like that.
Yeah, I thought, like, I wondered, for a long time, like, is he part black, or is it just a really good tan?
Like, I don't actually know. Like, he could be, but I'm sure at the time that he would have grown up, I very much doubt there would have been anyone black living in the town of Pontypridd. I very much doubt there's many black people living in the town of Pontypridd now. Never mind back 80 years ago, because he's in his 80s, isn't it? I can't believe he's in his 80s.
I believe so. If not late 70s, I think in 80s for sure.
Yeah, somewhere around there, isn't it? But yeah, it is. It's part of that proudness. Again, like I say, I'm proud to come from the land of Tom Jones, the land of the dragons, and all that. So it is nice. I am very proud to be Welsh.
So that's would you say that's a good? Now, when I say tourist, I don't mean like, like, oh, here's a cool photo op. But would you say that's a good place for somebody to visit? Like, if you've never been to England, is Welsh a good? Sorry, Welsh. I'm almost as dumb as my former president here. Is Wales a good place to visit?
Oh yeah, it absolutely is. As well, I'm actually the family business that I've got is bringing American churches and American choirs, like schools, over to the UK and giving them tours.
Nice.
So I did bits of work on that, and quite a few have come to places in Wales to see the cathedral, see the Welsh history. I think, again, I take it for granted that there's so much history in my town alone. Like, the reason people in Britain get free healthcare is because of a bloke who was born in my town and grew up in my town. And it's just, yeah, it's a great place for tourists. Like, you got the cities, you got like the capital of Wales, which is Cardiff. You got Swansea, you got St David, which are three major cities. But then you got loads of rural areas. You got the sea and some very nice beaches and stuff like that. It's all there's loads of history. If you like history, then you will love Wales. Like about 10 years ago, maybe we probably brought a Welsh choir next to the town over from my town, which is literally just across the road. We bought one of them. They came and they sang with some Welsh choirs, and they really enjoyed being in Wales. And it's a great, like, that's opened my eyes as well. Like meeting all these different choir directors from America, from all over the States, and bringing them to my home it makes me feel proud again.
Yeah, for sure. Now, the real thing that's going to bring people over is good food. Tell me, it's the best Welsh dish there is out there.
That's a difficult question. There's not a lot. Like the Welsh eat something. Well, we have something called Welsh cakes, which is basically a sort of cake, a very flat cake with like raisins or stuff like that, and a little dried fruit in, which is lovely, covered in sugar. Lamb is a Welsh thing, a bit of lamb. We have very much Welsh lamb. I'm trying to stay away from the weird things, like there's something called lava bread, which is apparently a Welsh dish, which is seaweed. It's like a really disgusting seaweed bready thing. And that's the only way I can describe it. But again, there's not a lot in Wales food-wise. I'd say you can't get good Welsh lamb. You can't get, if you want water, you can get lovely Welsh bottled water. If you can't tell, I'm not a salesperson because I'm absolutely butchering this sales, but Welsh lamb, Welsh water, and Welsh cakes. I love Welsh cakes. And when I introduced my English friends to Welsh cakes, they were gone. I bought a tub of Welsh cakes to my English friends. The next morning, there was none left. I was like, I haven't had a single Welsh. And it's very traditional. Like the Welsh cakes that I have are homemade by my mother or my nan. So it's very much nice Welsh food is homemade. You get that homely feel, like, no one makes Welsh cakes like your nan does. And that's something that's quite nice. So, if you visit Wales, contact me and I'll hook you up with some of my nan's Welsh cakes. And that's not a metaphor for anything.
Cool, man. Well, yeah, for sure. I'll let you know if I'm out there, so I can spell it with an H, like dummy, like our dummy Donald over here. But before we wrap it up, you want to throw any social media out there for people to follow?
Yeah, well, social media quite simple, really. If you're looking for me as a person or as an aspiring comic, it's Callum. So Callum _ the Schof, and Schof is SCHOF. And that's me on Twitter and Instagram. So Callum _ the Schof. And then for my podcast, which is the Perfect Road Trip Podcast, you can literally just search Perfect Road Trip Podcast. It's on Instagram, Perfect _ Road Trip _ Podcast. Facebook is the same, and on Twitter it's I think you get less characters on Twitter, right, as you're probably aware. So I couldn't fit it in, so I had to put PRT, the Perfect Road Trip _ Podcast.
Got it.
And then on there you can find me, and if you want to look at my old site, you can look at the SchofieldStories.com as well, and that's got all my social media handles, etc. on there. But yeah, just if you've got any question about anything, or if you want some really crappy jokes, find me, Callum _ the Schof. Yeah.
I'll make sure to tag you on there. At least on Instagram. I think that's where I do most of my my social media these days. That way people can find you pretty easily. But yeah, anything else you want to throw out there before we wrap it up?
Well, I just want to say thank you for inviting me on. I've really enjoyed speaking to you. Like we said right at the start, when we have ever met before, and I've really enjoyed it. I love what you do. I love the fact your podcast is just so different in every episode. And I'm really glad to be a part of that. So thank you so much for inviting me on.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate you having you on. I always welcome people back too. So, if ever there's something you want to plug or you just want to shoot the shit with the rest of us, welcome you back. For everybody listening at home, I appreciate it. Thank you. Fuck you and good night.
Love that ended.
Subscribe to the Ignorance is Strength podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Like, follow, and share on Facebook and Instagram at Ignorance is Strength Podcast and on Twitter at The Ignorance Pod.